Welcome, everybody. It's time once again for the next chapter with Charlie Hedges as he explores turning the page on his life and yours. Hey, Charlie.
Hi, Paul. My conversation today is with my dear friend and one-time personal coach, Dena Crowder. Dena makes the list for me of one of my all-time favorite people. Brilliant, wise, compelling, and Dena is so much fun. Today, we talk about the essentials of Dena's upcoming book about personal identity. Dena writes this: "Our identity is a story we tell ourselves about who we are and our place in the world. Dena and I agree that identity is a choice and an expression of our soul's desire, our passions, our experiences, and our DNA." So with that, and it's with great delight that I want to bring on our very special guest, Dena Crowder. Dena, dear friend.
Hi, Charlie.
Good to hear
Hi.
you. Yeah, it's so nice to connect again.
Always.
My gypsy friend who's been wandering the world. You really have. You've been to a
Always
lot
great,
of places. Yeah, that's.
Always great to be here and be back home.
Is it? Is it good to be back home? And you're in a moving process right now as well, aren't you?
I am. I'm in a moving process, and our whole world is in transition right now, Charlie. I believe I'm reflecting what's also happening all around us.
That's a very kind way to put it, transition. Instead of a mess, it's not so much in a mess, it's in a transition. Everybody else would say it's a mess, but not Dena Crowder, not optimistic Dena Crowder, who, not an avoider, but optimistic.
There's a myth about how both Venus, the goddess of love, and in another culture, Lakshmi, who's often seen as the goddess of true wealth and abundance, there are myths about how each of these goddesses come into being. And they have to do with what looks like a total, utter, chaotic mess. This ocean of absolute craziness. I think in one of the myths about Venus, there's movement in the ocean and it's chaotic, and there's even blood in the water. But you know what? We're supposed to look at that and say, everything is churning. Because something beautiful is trying to be born. Whether it's Venus rising up from that frothy mess, or it's Lakshmi rising up from that churning, frothy mess. Bigger view that I take. Yeah, It looks crazy. It's a mess. There's a lot of suffering and pain. I truly know that underneath all of it, something beautiful is trying to be born.
You remind me that it's not unlike birth of a child, isn't it? That is, in fact, a bloody mess. And it's not without trauma and difficulty, and look at the beauty that results.
Yes.
Yeah. Okay. Nice little detour, Charlie. Let's get us back here. Here's where I want to go, Dena. You know what I want to start with? You told me a story of a 20-something Dena who, after completing graduate school, decided you wanted to take yourself on a quest or journey to, if I have this right, to discover your purpose in life. I need to mention in the 60s, we called it trying to find myself. But that was really our mantra. But I want to hear about your time of your quest. Tell me a bit about that.
Yes. Nothing was supposed to be wrong because I had done everything right. I had just finished graduate school in record time. I finished that program in 1 year. I'm out, and it was supposed to be a 2-year program.
A 2-year program, yeah.
I'm doing it, Charlie. I'm out here. I'm winning. I'm fast. And I'm getting these awards. And then something wasn't thing. Couldn't name it. But after just speeding through I'm looking around and saying, wait a minute, I don't feel good. I am not, the first thing that happened was I wasn't getting jobs, and it was supposed to just happen.
Right.
Because I was the star here, and why am I not getting jobs? And then eventually, then I did get offered a job in the field that I'd been trained for. Something rose up in me that had no name and shouted no.
Really?
Right, and this sent me into a tailspin, about a mess. Because what's wrong with me? I've just spent all this time and energy and effort to get to the top of this pyramid and launch myself into a career, yet something in me is saying no. And then on top of that, I got sick and I needed to have a surgery. So all this compounded, and it's man in a hole, except I was a young woman in a hole. The way that I got myself out was completely strange. It wasn't a job that happened. It wasn't a career that happened. It was me making a connection to my spiritual self that I had probably forgotten about in the interim from when I was a little girl. That's what did it. And it held me onto this path that I've been on. But in the meanwhile, the way that I got started, it wasn't I knew what to do. I just did what I knew to do to try to climb out of that hole. And the first thing I did, which I thought, looking back, is so cute, 20-something me, I wrote a bunch of destiny letters. I wrote a letter. I made a copy for 25 people. In this letter, I said, I'm writing you this letter because I respect you. I think you have great wisdom. I'm trying to find my destiny. I know that I have some purpose, but none of these jobs or careers that are on offer fitting. I would like your help in assisting me with maybe introducing me to people or to a job or to a field I'm not aware of. And I started going around interviewing and doing little field trips to jobs. And then finally, at the end of all this destiny seeking, I wound up offering a coaching class, which I thought was going to be a side gig while I still was finding my destiny. And of course, the side thing turned into the main thing.
So you started coaching in your 20s?
Yes.
Oh, my goodness, Dena.
You didn't know this about me, Charlie?
I did not. No, we've never gone through your career path, so I thought you had a real job for a while.
No. I know. I started in my 20s. The real job that I had directly out of grad school, where I was a teacher, a curriculum coordinator at a private school. And during that time, I was being trained by an amazing, very globally influential coach, a female. She had a lot to do with the human potential movement earlier in the 70s and 80s. I was training. I thought I was going to be using those skills of coaching as a side thing. I thought I was going to be using those skills of coaching in whatever career I went into. I certainly did not think that was going to be my main thing.
Amazing.
And then it became my main thing very quickly, and here I've been for decades.
And to the benefit of so many of us, you're such a fine coach. You were one of the handful of people during my process, that you made a significant impact on my life, and with lots of insight. I have a question for you. You said one of the things you wanted to do was to either I can't remember the verb, rediscover or align yourself with your spiritual self. What is that? What is it, this spiritual self?
It, first of all, it's not religious.
Okay.
It has, right? We don't want to get people so for your listeners, it has nothing to do with one religion or any dogma at all.
Okay.
We all have the deepest part of ourselves. When that deepest part of self connects with the deepest part of life, we are there. We are connected. We could call it divine self. We could call it the spiritual self. But when connected to that place, we are connected to all of life. We are connected to whatever your word is for the Creator, for the higher power. And that is the thing that I didn't know I was missing. When I connected, I recognized, oh, we have a small self, and we have this divine self, this greater self. And it's that self that is attempting to lead me the path of life.
I was thinking of talking, I really want to spend a good amount of time on the small self and the true self. And I was thinking about talking that after we talked about identity, which our audience has no idea what I'm talking about. But I'm wondering if this is a good prelude. What do you think?
Sure.
Okay, let's do that. Let's start with each of us, and we both agree that each of us, the greatest battle perhaps that we will ever fight is this internal battle for power and control that occurs every minute of our life, and it's a battle between the small self and the true self. And you had a Martin Luther King, that something was quoted about Martin Luther King. Why don't you tell us about that? And that leads us into this so well.
Yes. It was someone at Martin Luther King Jr.'s funeral. It was a woman, and I can't remember her name. But she went up to the front and said, Martin Luther King had the ability to die daily. And it is a quote that almost verbatim reflects verse in the New Testament. And this ability to die daily is not about physical death. It's about the willingness and capacity to let go of the shackles of the small self. But we can also call the small self the ego.
Right.
Contrary to what has been popularized, the ego means you're arrogant. Oh, what an ego he has. Oh, we all have an ego. We all have personality. We all have a small self or an ego that functions in the world with an identity. It's a given in Earth School that we will have an identity. So it's not something that we can bypass or avoid, and it's not in and of itself bad. What is very detrimental is when we start to believe that we are nothing more than our identity, that we are nothing more than our small self. I call that shrinking to fit.
Brilliant, shrinking to fit. And one of the things that occurs to me that because this is a big topic in my life as well, and it has been for about the last 5 or 6 years, and that is the small self is very needy, and it goes to, I've called it power, prestige, and possessions, but it goes largely, as you and I discussed, it goes largely to control. And it wants to control the environment, control me, control what I believe, control how others impact me. And there's safety and control. We feel safety and control, but it's really not safe, and neither are we in control, are we?
Oh, no, we're not. Not at all. That sense of control from the small self, what we're seeking, because small self feels insecure. It's like the most insecure friend that you ever could imagine having is the small self. Why? Because it's hard to be human, Charlie, because we die in this form. Spiritually, we live on, soul live on, but the human body, the self, it does not. And if you know that your clock is ticking, the moment that you start out on the journey, you have a very finite existence. You're temporary. You're temporary. That's so scary. And we do everything at the level of the small self. Make that not try to be permanent, try to be continuous. And what you're describing, control, is going to make me safe. No, that's also a delusion, because you cannot do enough controlling to cause yourself to be permanent and continuous at the level of the small self.
Sure, we can't control ourself, let alone our culture and how our culture behaves, and we want our culture to behave according to our ever so rigid value system, and it's just the two do not live well together.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Trying to impose that control, the power over. We try to power over external circumstances. We try to power over other people and their belief systems or their behaviors, because that can temporarily, we're talking a lot about temporarily in the moment, might give the small self, might give the ego a feeling of, okay, I'm safe now. It's temporary, it's fleeting. It doesn't ultimately ever resolve or even address the real issue, which is how scary it is to try to strength to sit and believe you are only this small self.
And that's what you're talking about. Martin Luther King, when he could die daily, he was able to die to himself, and that's die to his small self.
And you become the greater self, and you're so much bigger. The irony of the whole thing.
And the greater self is the one that lives on and is more permanent, and that will be the one that transfers into the next world, not the small self.
You got it.
The greater self, we're always preparing for that transition, and yet we don't even really know that's what we're preparing for, but we're preparing for that great transition into our next self, whatever that would be, our next essence. I don't know about self. Mm-hmm. But let's talk, so we talked a bit about the false self, about the ego and its devices of control and possession, all of these sorts of things that are indeed very temporary and do not last, and the satisfaction of them does not remain. But we're honoring the true self or the big self. What is that, and where does one even begin to find that? What does that look like, Dena?
Such a great question. But it's a great question because it can seem like, where do I go to find this? Like it's far out. But it's as close as you're breathing.
Right.
It's as close as you're breathing. If you've had a moment, if someone in your life, a child, grandparent, even someone you're mentoring or assisting in some way, where you felt completely safe, generous, loving, and at one with this other individual. Often we do feel this with children, with babies. Your heart is open and you're feeling this. You are there. You are in place of deeper awareness. You are connected to the deepest part of life. Anytime that you are connected to a love is mutual exchange, you're there. We've all felt that. You know what that's like. Anytime you are the recipient of deep and radical compassion, you are the giver of deep and radical compassion, which is not the same as pity. With pity, you get to be the superior.
Right.
I'm not talking about that.
Right.
Anytime you've been there, you have contacted your spiritual self, your divine self. You are there. You don't have to wander around to find it. And when you're in that place, then there are insights for you, there are answers for you, there's guidance for you. And by the way, Charlie, just like in my journey in my 20s, we're never given things like the whole map. That,
right.
Oh, I'm going to get this 10 Commandments, and it's going to be this map, and it's going to be like Google. Turn left in 10 feet, turn left, and there you will find your life purpose. No, the spiritual realm works on a need-to-know basis.
That's
It
good.
does.
That's
If
good. I like.
You get a step to take. You will get it. Then you have to exercise courage and take that step. The small self will say, you need the whole map. You're not going to get the whole map.
You use that I think is an important word for the larger self or the true self, and that word is connection. I'd like to say I think connection is huge. That's what we were talking about. But it's not just connection, it's a selfless connection. Because the small self loves selfish connection. It loves controlling connection, whether you're controlling another person or you're just controlling the environment. You're controlling the environment of the relationship or whatever that may be. And it's selfless. That you are connecting for the love and the joy of connecting. And there's connection with people, connection with process. And then, as you said, there's connection with the divine. However you choose to define the divine, whether that is the divine, the holy, you could use God, you could use source, you could use universe, higher power, that there is something, some sort of essence greater than we are. And that when you connect with that selflessly, then you begin to discover, that you don't have to lose that small self, almost begins to dissipate. It can't live in the same room as the true self or the large self. There's not enough room for it. So you start filling up that room with goodness, and that room and the smallness seems to work its way out. I've never even thought of it that way. It's occurring to me right now. What do you think of that thought?
Yes, and mystics and a lot of spiritually oriented writings throughout the centuries speak about selflessness. In our modern world, people often have a very tough time understanding that and certainly applying it. One thing that I like to do with clients to help them with that is tell them, don't think about selfish, don't think about selfless. Think about top dog, underdog. Because when you are giving or receiving, if you are doing so from a place of mutuality,
Good word.
both parties are considered, right? And both parties are seen, respected, and considered, then you're good. But if the dynamic is one in which you are aiming to be the superior in order to get that control or all the things you were speaking about earlier, or sometimes aiming to be the inferior in order to get some kind of, I know it sounds kinky, Charlie, but a lot of people get a sense of superiority from being inferior because they get a sense of significance from that. Oh, I'm going to be inferior. My mind in this situation, I'm going to be the victim. And so by being the victim, repeating this pattern gives me a sense of righteousness. I've had a lot of clients who we have broken the spell of fake righteousness. Then they were free. Like,
That's
Dena,
wonderful.
I didn't realize
Yeah.
I was doing this all the time. I didn't realize that I was getting a sense of significance from having to always feel that I was the righteous victim.
That's really a big thing in our culture today, isn't it? And it doesn't matter who you are, what side of the tracks you live on, what labels are behind your name or numbers in your bank account. There is just this rampant feeling of victimization. Even the rich people are feeling victims and entitled, and it is just not helpful. It's not helping the world, but it's not helping the individual either. They're not growing. It becomes an impediment to growth, and I think that you're working on that is wonderful.
You're basically saying, you're shrinking to fit, and you're saying, I am nothing more than this little small, teeny, tiny, small self, and I am powerless. You're saying.
And your definition of power really works, because our audience needs to know I quote you. They've heard me quote you on the show several times, and I quote your definition of power. And the right kind of power, there's two kinds of power. There's in your definition, there's power over, which is the control, the authoritarian, my way, and then there's the power to, and that's to influence, to inspire, to help people move in a direction. You're not controlling that direction. You're more of a guide than you are a general. I'm thinking of these things all of a sudden. I never even put them in those terms. Do those work?
Yeah, power to, power with,
yeah,
versus power over. Absolutely.
I love it.
Power over is the urge to dominate and to operate within a top dog, underdog system. Random hierarchy rankings, and we are living at a time in this caste system, which has nothing to do with just a quote caste system based on, we would think, the caste system in India. We have a caste system all over the world, and it's in some places it's based on race, and in some places it's based on religion, and it depends. But it's this randomly associated rankings. You
Right.
have some people at the top, and you have other people at the bottom, and the top dogs are always seeking to keep the underdog from the people underneath them.
Right.
And it's done so with usually some form of fear and violence.
Yeah, I so concur. And the personality of the higher ups in the caste system, the whole caste system is built on the ego and the small self.
Right.
It's all built on that. And that is what we're trying to undo. You know what I want to do, Dena? I think we've really covered this well. And I want to move now. I want to take this information as a foundation, and I want to move to what your new book is about. And I want to talk about identity. And you call it identity is a story we tell ourselves. And I really want to get into that because I think that's a powerful concept. Let's take a break, and we'll come right back into that, okay?
Okay.
Hi there, this is Charlie Hedges, and you are listening to the next chapter with Charlie and my very special guest, Dena Crowder, who is so bright and so wise. And we have just talked about ego, the small self, the big self, the more spiritual self, the connected, empowered self that works in compassion and harmony with other people. But now I want to get to Dena's book that she's just finished the first draft, so it's going to be a year before it's out, but as I've discovered some of the content, it's brilliant. And Dena is writing a book on identity, and she talks about identity is a story we tell ourselves. I love that. Dena, you've got to talk to us about what this story idea is all about.
Yes. We are not who we think we are. We are telling ourselves a story about who we think we are. And it's a bunch of concepts. It's a story we tell ourselves about who we are and our place in the world. By the way, it's okay that we do that. There's nothing wrong with having an identity. The problem is that we begin to believe it's like one of those movies where you cast a spell on yourself and then you forget that it's a spell. You think, oh, this is normal. That's why my book is called Spellbreaker.
Oh, wonderful.
Yeah, and let's define spells.
Sure.
A spell is a sticky story that keeps you stuck. And identity delivers. Identity is the lieutenant of the ego. It's the main lieutenant. And it delivers many, if not most, of the spells that we as individuals and we as a society currently suffering under.
And many of these stories are childhood stories too, are they not? Are they not experiences that we had as a child, and we're not even realizing that we're rehearsing our younger years and carrying them forward as identities when that really is a choice that we don't, that we are not, there's nothing compelling us that we must abide by these stories, that these childhood stories don't have to control us. We can control them. Do I have that right?
Yeah, I like to say your identity story is like a patchwork quilt. It's pieced together from things, as you mentioned, childhood things, labels, categories, roles, things we believe describe us, sometimes things that are aspirational, maybe have nothing really to do with us at all, but we wish we were those things. So we say, that's who I am. I want to be a part of that group because that's what I'm aspiring to be. And one thing that, when you were mentioning about childhood, for example, in my case, when I was really young, maybe 4 or 5, 6 years old, my mom used to tell me this phrase. She would say, Dena, you have 3 strikes against you going into life. And have any baseball fans, we all know 3 strikes and you're out.
Yeah, it's not good.
Oh,
3 strikes is not good. Unless you're the pitcher.
Unless you are the pitcher. Dena, you have 3 strikes against you starting life. We're going to have to be twice as good to get half as far. And that went into the creation of my identity and the story I told myself about myself. It was very helpful for a time because it honed in me a complete lack of entitlement that people should just give me things. It honed in me incredible thirst for excellence and a willingness to put in the work.
Ergo graduating graduate school in 1 year instead of 2.
Exactly. Guess what? It also, at a certain point, became an obstacle. It became too small for me because if you always have to work twice as hard to get half as far, you're always operating from this thought, oh, I have 3 strikes against me. It can be an obstacle because it can keep you from expanding into a different experience of life. It did. It became too small for me to operate from that, and I had offer, if you will, that identity or that aspect of my identity onto the spiritual self. That's just part of the small self, anything in your identity, and I offered it. Opened up to having another experience. That was very significant, and it was an increase of my living power with and power to. Because if I had still continued to operate from that place, I would have not been able to grow myself, my influence, in the same way that I have been able to.
Does that take us back to what we began the show with? Is that the time you learned that? It is when you began that quest in your 20s? Was that the beginning of this process for you?
Yeah, it was the beginning of the process. It was the beginning of an unwinding of a lot of different stories that I was operating under, and it didn't happen overnight. Yes, that was the absolute beginning of that process.
It was like Dr. King, you were dying to yourself.
Yes, absolutely.
Okay, so tell me now about what that looked like as you began to die to the self. What sort of self replaced that you began to tell yourself stories? What kinds of stories did you become able to tell, or maybe even what kinds of stories do you tell yourself today? Because I love the idea of that you are stories about who you are and about your place in life. What kinds of stories do you tell yourself now?
Oh, breaking the sticky stories that were holding me back began back in my 20s when I went on my destiny quest, when I made contact with my spiritual self. And for your listeners, we will continue, as long as we're human, to break some of these sticky stories.
Right.
You will always be evolving and growing and hopefully recognizing, as Walt Whitman said, you are vast and you contain multitudes. It is your great good fortune to keep connecting to more and more of your capacity and to breaking the grip of the small self. And for me, if I look back to when I started out, I thought that finding my destiny meant finding the right thing to do, like a job or a title.
Okay.
And once I found that, would be living on purpose. What I realized was, oh no, that's too small.
Right.
That's another one of those sticky stories created by the ego.
Right.
Right?
Healthier, but not helpful. Not totally helpful, but not the end result helpful.
Right. It helped me to get on the path.
Right.
I was pursuing something, and I took those steps. But eventually, as I describe in the book, what happened is I realized, oh, that's a con, ultimately. If you keep chasing this external thing, we can be on purpose. Any of your listeners who is longing to feel that they are on purpose, that their life has meaning and significance, they can begin to make that shift right now in this moment, because the way that I define purpose is if you are aligning with your soul's desires and directions, if you are aligning with your soul's commitment, you are on purpose. Remember what I said. Spirit works on a need-to-know basis. So you just take that first step after you are, oh, I'm connected. And you know what? I am lining up with my soul's direction and with its commitment and desire, and I'm taking a step in that direction. Congratulations. You are now on the road of purpose.
I love that. I love that. In that, again, I want to go back to the question I asked before. Let's do it this way, and this may be too private, and if I am, just say, wait a minute, Charlie, this is my story. But I'm wondering, on a daily basis, what story does Dena tell herself about who Dena is and what is her place in the world?
Oh, no, that's not too private at all.
Okay.
Yeah, no, not at all. When I wake up, I ask, okay, what is my mission today? Because the story that I tell myself now is that I am in service to something that is greater than myself, that I am in line with a divine creative force that is wise and compassionate and is always seeking to help me evolve, help my soul evolve, and help us all evolve. Ultimately, the only power really is love, ultimately. And we're all seeking to return back to that place. For me, when I wake up, I have this story. Oh, I'm in service. And currently, that looks like I assist clients and there are people who might hire me or come across my path. I'm assisting them.
You're assisting Charlie on a podcast?
Yeah, assisting Charlie on a podcast. I'm assisting them to come into that place of connection for themselves too. And that whatever comes into my life is not an accident. Whoever shows up is not an accident. It's not happening to me, it's happening for me. It is allowing me to practice depth of what I know. Those are the kinds of stories that I tell myself.
Love it. Dena, I go by, there's a quote that resonates with me that I heard in, I want to say 1985, and I repeat it a lot. I attempted to write a book on it, and I had to put the book to the side because it just, even though I had chapters laid out and I wrote chapters, it just didn't come together. So I'm waiting on that book till it comes together. But it's based on a quote. You are who you have been becoming. And I just think that, Dena, that is so powerful to me. And there's lesson that comes from that is for today. If I am today who I have been becoming in the past, that means I will be tomorrow who I am today. I will become tomorrow who I am today. So today is a big choice. If I want to evolve, get better, grow in love, grow in my capacity to serve, essential for me, imperative for me to do that today if that's who I want to be in the future. And I love that concept, and I think that fits right in line with what you're saying about service and evolving, and that you are in process of making yourself, turning yourself into the person you can become, which is the title of the book that I have put to a side, but it's the person you can become.
Yes. We're all in this process of becoming. And if we're attuned to and listening to, it's like listening to a radio station. If you're tuned in to small self, 101, small self, here we go, then everything is going to seem different. You're going to shrink to fit. You're going to look for power over. You're going to be playing the game of top dog, underdog, and you will not ever feel that connection. I say that power begins with connection, and of course, I've already defined the kind of authentic power I'm speaking about. If you are tuned in to that powerful connection, then when you wake up every day, you will realize that you are not an accident, that you matter, and guess what? Other people matter too. Your safety and success value are not based on creating an identity that degrades, demotes, humiliates anybody else.
Exactly. It is not a comparative. It's not in comparison to somebody else. It's not at the expense of anybody else. It not only doesn't cost anybody else, it provides loving identity to other people. It helps people identify that they are worthy, that they are worth love, that they are valuable, they are cared for, that they are important. Kindness, because kindness and love are two words that I live by, and I think those are empowering. With those words, my heart is replenished, but I feel like the hearts of others, when I do kind acts, I am giving others permission to reform their identity and reform who they are and how they think of themselves.
Yes, because in the world we live in now, in our modern world, those acts of kindness sometimes require great courage, because many people have been conditioned to believe that kindness or compassion leave you weak, leave you powerless, You are going to wind up at the very bottom of that top dog underdog hierarchy, at the back, at the bottom, under somebody's boot. And we are completely confused about understanding that's not true. That's not true. That while it may look that way in some instances, your ability to connect to that deeper self is a necessary part of the recipe for the kind of world that we all want to live in.
Yeah, it is a backward idea, is it not? It is a backward idea in the American culture, because the American culture built on so much is built on the American dream and self-sufficiency and success and getting ahead, which I have no problem with any of that. But there are caveats around it about how we do that and what we do. And it's a very small, self-oriented goal. And in order to get over that, to overcome that, and to become something else, it requires collaborative caring and understanding that everybody is equally valuable. And that is and I'm liking the idea where we're heading in this a bit as we wrap up, that we have an opportunity to contribute to the identity of the person standing next to me. My love and kindness for them will build their capacity for love and kindness. Dena, my last question for you.
Unless they're a certifiable psychopath, in which case, moving.
Yeah, but fortunately, I've only known 2 or 3 of those in my life. But I have known a couple. Yeah, believe me, I have. So here's my question. I'm going to ask you the most difficult question of the day. In closing, with all our content today, and we've had tons of content, what might be for you one thing you want our listeners to walk away with?
Whatever you don't shrink to fit. You are a reflection of the power that created the universe. You are that. So why would you shrink to fit to anything less? Why would you do that to others? Expand. It's your birthright.
It's your birthright. That's wonderful. Thank you. Dena Crowder, you are the best. Thank you for spending time with me today.
Oh, it's my pleasure, Charlie. Thank you. I always love.
Likewise. And I also want to thank all our listeners for tuning into the next chapter with Charlie. And until next, this is Charlie Hedges signing off. Bye for now.